following show is paid programming and does not necessarily express the views and opinions of Urban Broadcast Media and its subsidiaries.
Thank you for listening to UBM Praise.
Let's go. Sir Walter Jones. Who is it? Sir Walter Jones. What's his name? Sir Walter Jones. Whose show is this? Sir Walter Jones. Who is it? Sir Walter Jones. Say it again. Sir Walter Jones. Who you with? Sir Walter Jones. One more again. Sir Walter Jones.
The Sir Walter Jones Show. Co-host Alvin Carter. We are a Christian talk show in where we tackle all the hot topics in a believer's walk. Wednesday is Music Business Night. We feature new and old artists. We talk about the music ministry in churches, choirs, musicians, music directors, etc. And we talk about publishing, record deals, ASCAP, etc.
Sir Walter Jones.
Who is it?
Sir Walter Jones.
What's his name?
Sir Walter Jones.
Whose show is this?
Sir Walter Jones.
Who is it?
Sir Walter Jones.
Say it again.
Wednesday.
The African-American story begins here on the Atlantic Ocean. Africans crossed these waters with the very first European explorers. And their stories show that right from the start, the black people who came to this land nurtured aspirations and dreams. Dreams that would never disappear, even in the long night of slavery. Dreams that would help them endure and overcome. Florida, the first known African in America, came here with Spanish explorers in 1513. His name was Juan Garrido. He was free and he left his mark on the New World. Garrido helped Cortez take Mexico. Then he headed for California, searching for gold. 20 years later, a black man struggled to cross this Texas desert. He was called Esteban the Moor. He was one of just 4 survivors of a Spanish expedition that went horribly wrong. Esteban served as a guide and a translator for his companions, negotiating their way to safety across this forbidding landscape. By the year 1536, they had walked 15,000 miles. They had seen more of the North American continent than any explorers would until Lewis and Clark. Garrido and Esteban were among the first Africans in our country. They found hope and opportunity here. But things changed quickly. Jamestown, Virginia, the first British colony in what became the United States. In 1619, this was the ultimate frontier town. Crude fortifications bordering a muddy, malarial swamp. Then one morning in August, a ship appeared, the White Lion. It was a pirate ship carrying African slaves. Roughly 20 of them were traded here for food. That's how slavery began in the English colonies. Plantations, as we imagine them, didn't exist yet. This was just a fragile outpost in the wilderness.
Hello, everybody. It's Sir Walter Jones Show. I am he. It is Wednesday. Music Business Day. Yeah, sit around the mic and talk about music stuff. Today we're going to kind of shut that down a little bit because it's been a very interesting year, to say the least. So much has been going on in America as it deals with racism and division and segregation and just wars upon wars. Bigotry has reared its evil head again. Not again. It's just never lied down. And it is here. We've been hearing so many things that has been going on. You know, every time we turn on the news, somebody did something which caused us to come together or divide. And breaking news here, breaking news there. And it got to the point where breaking news have been taken to another level because we have demeaned even the phrase breaking news. Breaking news is not what it used to be back in the days of Walter Cronkite and Peter Jennings and let's see who else, Tom Brokaw, you know, and these guys. That's not the breaking news that we used to have. For instance, today's breaking news would be probably Donald Trump said something stupid. All right, or he's over there at the border over to Mexico doing or saying something crazy. All right, that's today's breaking news, and it's ridiculous. So today's news is not really news, you know. But today I was watching the news, which is I guess bona fide, classified breaking news. A 43-year-old killed by the University of Cincinnati cop during a traffic stop, and you know, the officer was charged with murder, and he turned himself in today. Okay. That has put some encouragement on the family of the brother who's dead now, and but if it wasn't for body cameras that the cops wore, if it wasn't for squad car dash cams and cameras in the police stations, we would not be talking about much of this stuff. Not in the way that we're talking about it now. It'll just be a dead person, okay, by the hands of a cop. And the cop usually, probably 90% of the time, will win because there's just no proof that, or no justification on all of the other stuff, except by public opinion, appeal, or public eyes. We see the video and there goes the proof. Unfortunately, though, the public can't see that great. We don't have great vision. Shucks, I don't have great vision. I have contacts in my eyes right now. And one is better. I have a 250 on the right eye and a 400 on the left, so I'm really jacked up. Okay, and the public cannot see a picture without them finding some fault in the picture, and we're not knowing that it's been photoshopped or not. We can't even see a video without making a decision that that ain't who they say it is. Okay. That's just the way America sees things today. Social media has turned us upside down. So Friday we did the Sandra Bland story. Monday we talked about the black man, the endangered species. Tuesday we talked about Whitney Houston and Kistina and that saga. And then yesterday, well, that was Tuesday, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then so see, the days are crawling in on me. And so today we're talking about the sin of slavery. I'm calling this a crimson stain. And the reason why I'm bringing this up today and erasing maybe the music show today is because since we've been on this vein since Friday, I want to continue on this and finding out what is the root of the problem of why we are so divided in this country the way we are. What happened? There is another article that I did see. I watch the news a lot, and I think the problem with African Americans in America is that you guys don't watch the news. You really don't. You do not watch the news, and the little bit that you get, you think that's all the news you need for the week. And then the only news you get now is from social media, which a lot of times is flawed news. There are websites out there that give you wrong news. They give you make-up news. They'll even tell you in the disclaimer, this is not real news. It's like the Inquirer, okay? Inquiring minds want to know. So you guys will post something on Facebook thinking it's real news, and it's not. And then you guys are so uninformed that you will put on Facebook somebody who you think just died, but they died 7 years ago. I get so tired of seeing that stuff. And you're like, oh, and then the people who are commenting on it saying, oh, R.I.P., 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 back and forth. Nobody pays attention to the elephant in the room. And African Americans, we are so horrible with that. So the picture of Sandra Bland was there and everybody took it apart. Y'all became forensic scientists saying she was dead. Look at her hair. Look at her cheekbone. Look at her eyes. Look at this. But the guy who I was talking to who look at dead bodies every day was saying, that girl ain't dead. I see dead bodies every day. What are y'all talking about? But what he's saying is the public turn into scientists and professional people when it comes to trying to analyze what they think is evidence. And then when real evidence pop up on the scene from the video of her actually taking a picture, a mugshot, then we start to analyze that. That ain't her. It's amazing. But you didn't say that when the cop cam showed her being arrested. Y'all didn't say that ain't her. That's us. We are amazing. Now, that's the African-American side. Let's look at the world side or the white side. Why aren't we as universally outraged over Sandra Bland's death as we are over Cecil the lion? Okay? Cecil the lion. Some of y'all are saying, who in the world is Cecil? Yeah. It is a credit to the humanity that we can be unified in outrage at the death of an innocent creature like Cecil, that poor lion. The 13-year-old protected Zimbabwe lion who was illegally poached by a wealthy Midwest dentist. His name Walter. I wish his name was not Walter. Walter Palmer, okay, last week went down there, and this is his second offense, by the way. Shot this poor lion. All right? One has to wonder why we cannot similarly come together to condemn the deaths of a woman of color who died in police custody like Sandra Bland. Okay? The loss of a rare and beautiful creature like Cecil has stirred outrage from around the world. The only controversial seems to be which content it is an amazing story to see how we come together for something we have dominion over, which is an animal. And don't mess with some folks' animals. Please don't do it. Now, you can shoot a black man and be quiet about it, but don't shoot an animal. All right? While a few mush-brain libertarian types have come down on Palmer's death, Palmer's side, that is, the bulk of the reaction to his crimes, which include bribing of wildlife officials, have been negative. They even said that they even threatened to kill this man's children. Said that they wish that he'd catch cancer, all kind of stuff, because he shot a Cecil, the lion. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm trying not to laugh at this, but a woman lost her life, whether it was suicide or whether it was homicide. She's gone. And it's just amazing how we are. All right? It hit network news, both of these stories, both of them. But Cecil the lion got more attention and more sympathy. I'm also looking at a story which is dear to my heart from South Dakota. I lived there for about 4 years. Okay? The Native Americans live over there. All right? And this girl here, Native American woman, dies in jail begging for help. And officers told her to quit faking it. All right? Aberdeen, South Dakota. I live right up the street from Aberdeen. Early this morning, Sarah Lee circled Bear. The natives over there, they have those names. Afraid of lightning, Bear caught in trap, or Wolf on a hound. And those are their actual names. That's their last names. A Lakota woman was jailed on an alleged bond violation over a suspended DUI charge. Circle Bear was booked into jail on July 6th and would not leave alive. According to authorities, Circle Bear was found unconscious and not breathing in her Brown County holding cell, July 12th. Brown County Coroner Mike Carlson says the results of an autopsy conducted Monday was inconclusive. He says he's waiting on toxicology and tissue results to determine Circle Bear's cause of death. Carlson says Circle Bear had minor injuries after a minor car crash. He says those injuries would not have caused her death. In a report on Tuesday, a reporter for Indian Country Today, Sarah Sunshine Manning, spoke with the family about the death of their beloved Circle Bear. According to the Indian County Today, witnesses said that Circle Bear was pleading with jailers that she was in excruciating pain. Manning reports. Jail staff responded by dismissing her cries for help, telling her to knock it off and quit faking. Inmates cried out for the jail staff to help her, to which they eventually responded by picking her up off the floor, dragging her out of the cell, and transferring her to a holding cell. Circle Bear was later found unresponsive in the holding cell. Okay? Ain't nobody talking about this. You know why? She's a Native American. That's number one. Number two, y'all don't watch the news. You don't read the newspapers no more. You would have found out about it, but you're not interested. And then there's the media. They're not interested either because they didn't report it. That's how we know about Sandra Bland, because it was reported on national media. You see how this ticking time bomb is? So Circle Bear's death come at a time when special attention is being given to in-custody deaths of inmates. I told y'all the stats the other day. 300 people or more commit suicide in jails at 2010. That's a lot of people. How are they committing suicide? How? Sandra Bland's unfortunate death has shed light on the brutal reality that exists inside and outside the U.S. justice system. Another Native American, Rexdale W. Henry, 53, was arrested for failure to pay a traffic fine on July 9th. 5 days later, on July 14th, Henry would be found dead in the Neshoba County, Mississippi jail cell. The death of Henry and Circle Bear haven't gotten near the attention they should, as the Sandra Bland case is dominating media at this moment. However, their lives had no less value, and their cases deserve equal scrutiny. If no one knows about them, however, justice will likely never be served. Yeah. And that's a shame, because they are the original members of the United States. We call them Native Americans. They don't want to belong here. Everybody else came here either on their own or they was shipped over here like us. Okay, how is all of this happening in America? So I want to bring in this whole slavery thing. I guess you can call this Roots season 2 for us. It's happening in the 70s, and this is Roots now. This is movie night, y'all, on the Sir Walter Jones Show. I got a lot of files here I'm going to play. I let the files talk for me because, I am getting a little hoarse. I've been at church all night, all night last night, night before that, and I don't know where I was the night before that. I can't remember, but I'll be in church all week. Okay, talking and singing and talking. So I'm gonna take a little break, take some tea here. But there's a show called African Americans: Many Rivers to Cross. It is an amazing documentary. Came out 2013 by Henry Louis Gates Jr. Y'all know Henry Louis Gates, right? Remember when he had the same run-in with a cop at his front door? And they wanted to come in and they wanted to do something. I can't remember what it was. And he got upset. And he wound up having to go down to the jailhouse because of it. And President Obama got involved, and they had what's called a beer fest. Go ahead and Google it, because many of you African Americans don't even know what that is. Why? Because it wasn't on your Twitter feed. Lord have mercy. I'm just amazed at you guys. I want to put America on my knee and spank it. I do. I really do. I want to pistol whip it. That's really what I want to do. I just can't believe how you don't want to learn. You do not. If you listen to the Sir Walter Jones Show at any day, at any time, you're going to learn something. You will. Because we take facts, we put it on the table, and then we turn the table on you and show you something. Some of you don't even know what the back of your hand look like. You just don't. We show you the back of your hand on this show. Look at it. It's dirty. Go and wash it and put some cocoa butter on it if you're African American, because that's the god of cleansing. If you're ashy, go get you some cocoa butter. Let's see where I want to go right now, because I got different places I could go. You heard my intro. Garrido and Esteban, the Moor, these Spanish folks here. Y'all know some history about the Spanish. We're going to talk about the Spanish today. We're going to talk about the French. We're going to talk about the British. And we're going to talk about Americans. We're going to talk about Haiti. We're going to talk about Canada. Okay, all of these areas here is very important in our history, and it has affected us as African Americans, or we have affected them. Okay, more so we have affected them, because if it wasn't for us, the way the world is today would not be the way the world is today if it had not been for African Americans or Africans or slaves. We have really made an impact on the world, not just America. And you're going to hear in these files here. Jamestown, y'all know where that is. The White Lion ship came in, 20 slaves on it. See, when you guys were in school, all you heard about was Columbus. That's it. That's all y'all knew. All right? That kid was poured into you. And Columbus came here. The only thing he discovered was that somebody else was already here. But yet they celebrate him all over the United States. The only place they don't celebrate him is in South Dakota. Good. They don't have Columbus Day. They're not allowed to have it. By law, it's called Native American Day. That's right. The bank's closed, and on the sign on their door it says, Happy Native American Day. Good. Matter of fact, what's his name? And who's that on the $20 bill? I think it's Andrew. Yeah. The Native Americans don't even own $20 bills. If you pass them a 20, they're going to ask you for change. They don't want his face in their pockets because he tried to annihilate them. All right, so we're going to A. This is Anthony Johnson, or Antonio the Negro, 1620s, okay, the early 1620s. You listen to this story, and we're going to take you through a journey, y'all, okay? This is movie night on the Sir Walter Jones Show. Let's get this ball a-cracking.
Lives in colonial Virginia were very precarious. They were really stuck at the edge of survival. Whoever was trying to... I've come here, just a few miles from Jamestown, to look for traces of a man named Anthony Johnson. A man whose life shows how slavery evolved in Virginia. Our first notation of Anthony Johnson is from an early Virginia muster roll, which essentially defines him as Antonio the Negro. So his blackness was part of his name, his title. Exactly. Despite his skin color, Johnson found opportunities in Jamestown. He worked side by side with his owner and forged a bond based on necessity. In order for the master to survive, he needed Anthony Johnson to make a farm in this kind of environment. It was all about manual labor. So Anthony Johnson earned his way to his own freedom. And his master actually provided him with sort of a startup, if you will. You even gave him a little cash, some land? Some land, it seems, yes. Anthony Johnson soon began to prosper. He owned a 250-acre tobacco farm. He had white indentured servants. And he even had an African slave of his own. But as Johnson prospered, so did Virginia. Within decades, Jamestown had become the center of a booming tobacco economy that was desperate for labor. And this transformed slavery from a loose, informal arrangement into a rigid racial system. A system in which a life like Anthony Johnson's would be inconceivable. Johnson's blackness, his Africanness, these things define him, mark him as an outsider. The stigma of blackness. The stigma of blackness. And the fact that the status was tied to that observable trait was one which is very difficult to surmount. After Johnson died, a court ruled that he was, quote, a Negro, and by consequence, an alien. And then the colony of Virginia seized his family's land. Johnson's story marked a new era in the British colonies. From this point on, slavery would be solely based on race, and the acquisition of slaves would be central to the acquisition of wealth. In effect, the British were simply trying to do what many Europeans had already done.
Can you believe that? Brother Johnson, a brother, had indentured white servants and slaves. Somebody like, I ain't never heard of them. I know you haven't. That's why I'm here to inform you. Go to not Hulu, go to Netflix or go to pbs.org and watch this documentary. I'm going to play a lot of it tonight. I'm just going to play maybe episode 1. Okay? You're going to hear some stuff you've never heard before. You thought you know your history? And not after this show. You going to be like, I ain't know nothing about that. Yeah. Now, and I'm going to talk about tonight, does the Bible condone slavery? Okay, we're going to get into that as well, because I've got some stuff here about that, because the answer is yes and no. The Bible does and the Bible don't. All right? But we call this a crimson stain, slavery. The vast majority of flags of modern nations do not use crimson. Nepal is one of the very few of them, okay? Countries which uses the color, if only one. Nepal also holds the distinction of having the only flag in the world that is not rectangular or square. Yeah. In modern times, slight variations of crimson have been created for special uses, such as colors called fandango pink, radical red, created by the crayon people, electric crimson, and variations created especially for the university in the state of Utah. But in the King James Version, the word crimson occurs about 5 times. I think my favorite spot is in Isaiah chapter 1. You guys have to go there because that's very important. All of which are in the Old Testament, all 5 of them. The 3 Hebrew Old Testament words from which it is derived are karmiti. That's in the Strong's Concordance, by the way, which means a deep red, or tola, which refers to the maggot from which the dye is derived, in shania or shanai, which refers to the color's name. So some Bible commentators believe that scarlet and crimson refers to the same color in Scripture, Joshua 2:18. The Hebrew word translated as scarlet is the same one translated as crimson in Jeremiah 4:30. The word used in Joshua denotes the pigment of the cloth Rahab was to hang outside her window as a sign to the Israelites not to attack the house. This color used in Scripture lends itself to the symbolically meaning worship of God, 2 Chronicles 2:7, or a person's sins. Isaiah 1, God says, although your sins be as scarlet, he says, I'll make it white as snow. So slavery is a leaf, it has left a crimson stain, and we're going to find out what that stain is. All right, it's 4:30 almost. Well, one more minute in the PM in Chicago. I want to hear some old freedom, the gospel, golden gospel singles of Decatur, Georgia. February 13, 2007. Sir Walter Jones Show.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Freedom. Oh, freedom.
Yeah, that's it. I was singing with them, by the way. They didn't pay me. They did pay me respect, though. Old Freedom, the Golden Gospel Singers of Dakota, Georgia, February 13, 2007. Yeah. Great song, great Negro spiritual. We're going to give you a little history also. At the top of the hour, I'm going to play something from Whitney Phipps in a minute. He's going to talk about some Negro scales. And good stuff, man. This is music business and music ministry show, so we might as well add some of that in there. But I'm going to go to my file B called Slavery Everywhere. Y'all think slavery was just in America? For those of you who think it was, you ain't been paying attention. None whatsoever in history class. Brazil, Mexico, and the Caribbeans, man, it was everywhere. The Portuguese and the Spanish were making a fortune off of African Americans. I keep calling them African Americans, but, you know, they were slaves. They were from Africa, okay? They were from all over the place. And let's hear what they got to say about this, because pay close attention to some of the words, because it's some stuff you have never heard before. Slavery everywhere.
By the time Anthony Johnson arrived in Jamestown in the early 1620s, more than 500,000 enslaved Africans had already been spread across the New World into Brazil, Mexico, and the Caribbean. The free labor of these slaves was making fortunes for the Portuguese and the Spanish. Now, the British wanted to get in on the action.
Most of the largest cities of the Americas were dominated by Africans. There were more Africans in those cities than there were Europeans. Here I'm talking about places like Mexico City, Lima, Panama City. All of those colonists understood a world in which Africans were the primary labor force for producing wealth for Europe.
I think it's important to understand the British are not innovating when they settle Jamestown. They're trying to catch up. American historians sometimes treat the emergence of slavery as a mystery, right? All of a sudden people look at, how did all these Africans get here? The real mystery would have been if slavery had not developed in Virginia.
A brutal equation ruled the New World. Black equaled slave. And to fulfill their hunger for slaves, the British turned to the place that many other Europeans had turned already, Africa.
Blacks equal slaves. Wow. And it was everywhere. By the time we got here, it was a new thing. It was a new fad. But man, it was everywhere. Again, I'm gonna tie this into what the Bible has to say about slavery and put it all together so you can really get it. But we're gonna go to C, where it's called. This is Sierra Leone. They practiced slavery. Okay, Port Loco. These are the Temne people. The Republic of Sierra Leone is a country in West Africa. For those of you who didn't know that, okay. And you know they did say that we who are Americans don't really know where things are, meaning geographic. We don't know. We can't even find Israel on the map because we don't know. As a matter of fact, they said that the average American can only pick out about maybe 10 states, if that many, on the map. Yeah. So Sierra Leone, it's bordered by Guinea in the northeast. Okay, look on the African map. Okay, Africa is not a country, by the way. Oh my God. It is bordered by Guinea in the northeast, Liberia in the southeast. Y'all see it on the map? Good. And the Atlantic Ocean in the southwest. Y'all see it? You spotted it, didn't you? Okay, let's see what happened in that little territory.
Sierra Leone was once a major hub for the slave trade. More than 300,000 people were taken from here and shipped to the New World in bondage. But the first slave traders in this place weren't Europeans. They were other black Africans. Africans practiced slavery long before they ever saw a white person. All across this continent, slaves were part of a system based not on race, but on ethnic difference and brute power. A system involving an enormous array of monarchs, merchants, and mercenaries.
African kingdoms were at war with one another. War was a theme in Africa and actually Europe as well for many, many years. And so as a part of these wars, as a result of these wars, people were taken hostage and made into slaves.
I've come to Port Loko, a river town in Sierra Leone, and the long-standing home of the Temne people. For centuries, the Temne here collected captives who had been taken in wars. They tied them, packed them into small boats, and sailed them downstream, where they were sold to Europeans for profit. We sometimes romanticize Africa. We think that Africa was idyllic until the white man came. But there were deep tensions between ethnic groups here. Black Africans didn't necessarily feel the bonds of skin color any more strongly than, say, white Europeans did.
Slavery was ongoing before the Europeans came. It was just a common business. They come here in this wharf. Here is the landing part for the boats.
Who were the slave traders?
The slave traders were great warriors, strong men, chiefs. They do this business.
A lot of misery loaded on these boats.
Yes, but our people, we are not thinking about misery. It was a lucrative business.
Mm-hmm. Assalamu alaikum.
Professor Gates.
I was surprised to find out that in Port Loko today, there are still many families whose ancestors profited from the trade. And some of them were willing to tell me about it. Good. Just speak from your heart. Did any of you receive wealth inherited from the slave trade?
Being of my said more fear not an or 500 slaves.
500?
500.
My God, so he was very rich.
Yes, yes, our people we are rich. Until the road account of Karam then people saw ban or anti Kotegu and Apagua are Rome Bomiowi.
Would chiefs wage war just to get slaves?
Oh, yes.
In America,
we think black men were selling black people to the white man. But when you see it, do you see it as Temne were buying Loko, Mende were buying Temne, etc.? Is there a difference?
Well,
were all black people black?
Only BB.
It's true that black people are black.
So for certain team,
we don't speak the same language. I don't like what you like. You know, we don't just live in harmony.
Though some find it difficult to face, the crucial role of Africans in the slave trade is now well documented. Historians estimate that the overwhelming majority of the slaves shipped to the New World were captured and sold by African kingdoms. But Africans did not invent slavery. It existed everywhere, dating back to the most ancient civilizations. Nor did Africans envision slavery as something that would be passed on from one generation to the next, something based exclusively on race. That was a European innovation.
Wow, did you hear that? That ties into scripture because, again, the slave trade in Sierra Leone among the Africans, among themselves, they were selling themselves to each other, and then they began to export each other outward from that territory. 300,000 of them were enslaved, okay? But they didn't do it for race purposes. They did it for commercial reasons only. Yes, whites enslaved us for monetary gain, of course, but it was twofold. Because as long as you had a black face, you were considered lower. You weren't even considered a class. You were like an animal, pretty much. You were property. So because of your skin color, you were just considered. That's why you had to show papers. If you ever was walking around, you had to show papers whether you were free or not, okay, because of your skin color. But in other territories, it wasn't about the skin color. It wasn't. It was about economic status and what have you, okay? And so is the scriptures, as I'm going to dive into in a minute. But again, this is stuff, some of you have been hearing about it, yes, but we've sold ourselves into slavery into Americas. But, the Africans, they was doing it a long time, way before America was doing it. And then before the Africa, the Sierra Leone, the Timneh people was doing it, it goes all the way back to Bible times with the Jews. Those Hebrews were enslaved, and even goes back prior to that. Okay, but let's talk about the European impact. Okay, not so much the impact, but the pact. Okay, they have a pact saying, European says we're not going to enslave each other. We're Europeans. We're not going to do it to each other. We're only going to do it to people of color. Amazing stuff that you did not know. You like why is it? There was slavery in the European territories, but it was us. It wasn't them. Let's go to that European pact.
Europeans had actually developed an idea over several centuries that they should not enslave each other. They could kill each other, torture each other, fight each other in wars. But Europeans did not enslave other Europeans because Christians did not enslave other Christians. The great advantage of Africans is that they were outside the European community. And so it was possible to use race as a way of providing a marker of who's enslavable and who's not.
Sailing in ships of radical new design, armed with new weapons and new technologies, Europeans transformed slavery into a business far larger and far crueler than anything the Africans had ever done. Of course, it didn't happen overnight. The dehumanization of an entire race was a process requiring many steps.
I said that. You see what I'm saying? It was all about their race. They dehumanized them more than any Africans had ever done to themselves. Whew, this thing is deep, and it goes all the way up until today. This is exactly what's going on today. It's about your skin color. Let me go quickly to this file right here because I got to quit just a little early for break. This is called the Boomtown, I'm calling it, of slavery, and I'll explain why I called that in a minute.
One occurred here. This beautiful island, shrouded in fog, is home to what was once a fortress built by the British in the 1670s.
Out there is the mouth of the Putloko Creek. African middlemen used to bring their slaves and goods down the Putloko Creek, through the mouth of the Putloko Creek out there, all the way to this beach here.
So they came right through that gap right there.
Yes.
They would bring them here, then march them straight up there and sell them.
Up this hill, up onto the trading area.
Though its walls have long crumbled, I could still get a sense of how this place once worked.
This was the main entrance into the fort. It had a double folding door with a little room patch on top.
British officers lived here in a lavish two-story mansion.
That's a fireplace, a fake fireplace, because there is no flue. This is the tropics. You don't need a fire in the tropics. But it was an attempt by the slave traders that lived here at elegance.
A little touch of home.
A little touch of home.
How many men? The British enjoyed parties here, even a small golf course. Slaves, meanwhile, were herded like cattle.
In here is the women's and children's slave yard.
They were branded, then held in pens for shipment to the New World.
So the men were over there and the women and children were right here.
So they could hear each other's cries?
Definitely. They could have heard each other's cries, but they could not help each other. In fact, let me show you the men's slave yard. It's right through these doors. By the time they got here, we were very terrified. And then they were examined like cattle, their eyes, teeth. And then when the slaves were taken out to be put on board the slave ships, they were branded with the letter S on their left breast to denote that they came from Sierra Leone.
This place was not unusual. There were dozens of forts like this, up and down the African coast. We're not even sure exactly how many slaves passed through this island. 50,000 at least. We know the names of a handful and the stories of a precious few.
I call it Boomtown. There's a place where you can get all the firecrackers and explosives you want to get. Everybody who's ever traveled up and down, going down south, you stop in Boomtown. Usually on your way back into Illinois, you stop at Boomtown. That's where you got all your illegal fireworks. Okay, it wasn't illegal at Boomtown. You can walk outside the door, still not illegal. As soon as you get in the car and drive across the Illinois border, then sometimes the cops will pull you over, state trooper, because it's illegal to have it in Illinois. Boomtown, just a place to stop to get whatever you need. That's the way these towns were. These ports had black people, okay, like cattle, like furniture, and they had a stamp on it, like what's that agricultural stamp that they have in the grocery stores? You turn it over and it says it's got that. What is that stamp? What is the acronym? It's by the Agricultural Department of Agriculture or something. I don't know what it's called. Somebody help me out on Facebook if you can. They got that little stamp on all the food, especially the meats. There you go. Thank you. The USDA, United States Department of Agriculture. That's the way the slaves were. They were stamped, and they had an S. They had S stamped on them, telling you where they came from. Especially this, he said the S is from Sierra Leone. Okay, I'm gonna go to a quick break because I got a file that's kind of long. Actually, Brittany, Yeah, what I meant to, let's do this. I want to play the Whitney Phipps. Whitney Phipps Negro scale. I think this is a great history on the scales of how whites play and how blacks play. Play that right quick.
Think about that for a minute. But did you know, she said to me, did you know just about all Negro spirituals are written on the black notes of the piano? This is absolutely true. You can go home tonight and play almost any Negro spiritual, just play the black notes on the piano. You look skeptical. Now, you can't see it out there, but I want you to watch. Watch. There are 5 black notes on the piano. And those same 5 black notes just keep recurring. And you can go home tonight and play almost any Negro spiritual, just play the black notes. Watch. You know that? Every time I feel the spirit, just black notes. Watch this. That's because the slaves didn't come to America with do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That's somebody else's scale, okay? All they had in their musical scale were those 5 black notes. We know it in music as the pentatonic scale. And they built the power and pathos of the Negro spiritual on 5 notes.
Pentatonic. Yeah, go ahead with that. Pentatonic. That's 5, y'all. Matter of fact, that's the first 5 books of, that's the first. It's not heap, it's the first Greek. Pentateuch. Sometimes you say Pentateuch. Okay, and then you've got the Pentagon.
Yeah.
5. Yeah, so those black keys there, we call them ebony.
Yes.
They're above the ivory, if you notice.
Yeah, they sit above.
That'll preach.
Yes, it will, because white stands for the plague. Black means you in the clear.
I ain't saying nothing. I didn't expound on none of that.
Well, I do all the time.
But if you notice, though, it's the white keys, the ivory, that's the natural keys.
Yeah, they call it natural. I don't understand that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's I don't know why.
I have theories.
Well, B is not natural. That's the one note they argued over what to name it.
Well, you know what? Not only that, F is not really natural.
It's a semitone.
And F is E sharp.
Yes. And B is C flat.
You see what I'm saying? And C is B sharp.
And C is also D double flat.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So when they say that we are colors, they turn more colors than we do.
Yeah, they do.
If they
because each white note can be double flat or double sharp. Diminished or augmented?
You see when Alvin's walked in the room, you see how things turn.
Wow, just blame me.
You see how things turn around. And this is Wednesday. It is our music business show. But we try to put that in there every now and then. So you notice he said all the Negro spiritual songs, you could sing them all and you could rule in that pentatonic. Those
wow,
scales
yeah.
there. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. You hear it? Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play here Amazing Grace. He does the song.
Wow. I just played Old Freedom in all black
notes.
notes.
You see what I'm saying? I know you did.
Wow.
Ain't that something? It's beautiful.
Oh, freedom.
Yes, sir.
Oh, freedom over me.
Yeah.
And before I be a slave,
yes, sir,
I'll be wrapped up in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Wow.
That is something that God has placed in us.
That is divine.
That's why we clap on the 2 and the 4 too.
Man.
That we have our different. The whites have theirs. The Hispanics have theirs.
Yeah.
And the Asians have theirs.
Yeah.
A lot of times theirs. Come on now.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're bunched together.
Yeah.
Abstract.
Yeah.
It's abstract.
The dissonance and fits.
Okay. God has placed the variations in different. There you go. That's exactly it. Yeah. So Whitney
fifths and thirds. I
think he did a wonderful job of doing that.
Oh, yes, he did.
So here's the history of the slave scale, but in the song "Amazing Grace." Let's play that, and we'll go into break.
And what's funny is he heard those moans, and God gave him lyrics for their moans.
That's where he's going.
I ain't know that.
And they built the power and pathos of the Negro spiritual on 5 notes. When you study music, you also come across what are known as white spirituals. Did you know that? And they are white composers who work with that scale. In early America, they used to call this the slave scale. And I'm going to play for you what some musicologists think is the most famous white spiritual built on the slave scale or just the black notes. Anybody tonight know who wrote that song? I heard it, a man by the name of John Newton. But do you know what John Newton did before he became a Christian? He was the captain of a slave ship. And many believe heard this melody that sounds very much like a West African sorrow chant and wrote the words Amazing Grace and set his words to a slave melody. I looked up that song. I believe God wanted that song written just the way it was written, just so that we would be reminded that as Christians, whether black or white, free or bond, in his eyes, we're all connected. We are connected. And we are connected by God's amazing grace. Hallelujah! We are connected by God's amazing grace. Woo! I looked up that song in the Library of Congress. I went to the Library of Congress, I looked up that song. And wherever you see it authentically printed, you know what it says? Words, John Newton, melody unknown. I tell the Lord, when I get to heaven, I want to meet Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, but boy, I want to meet that slave called unknown. And I recorded that song the way I hear it. When I sing it, I still hear the sounds of the slave ships in the water. I want to sing it for you the way John Newton probably first heard it, coming up out of the belly of the ship. Listen. how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. And when we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've known this days to sing God's praise. That when we first begun, hallelujah,
The following show is paid programming and does not necessarily express the views and opinions of Urban Broadcast Media and its subsidiaries.
Thank you for listening to UBM Praise.
Wednesday.
Whitney. You can't
Whitley.
go wrong.
Call him Whitney. I thought his name was Whitley.
Yeah, it is. It's Whitney.
Whitney.
Yeah, like Whitney Young.
Okay.
Phipps. I used to say Phillips for many times. Yeah.
What's her name? Whitney Brown.
Whitney Brown. Yeah. If you just tuned in, you missed an hour of just amazing programming. I'm patting myself on the back, by the way.
Go ahead, man.
Amazing.
Your arms are long enough to do that.
My arms really is. Amazing program. Okay, I'm really helping you guys out here. I think Paul Rogers is my favorite cousin, by the way. Hopefully my other cousins ain't listening. He mentioned also Fats Waller.
Oh, wow.
Which is he talked about the stride
piano. Well, Fats, you can't forget. Oh my God, Fats derived his stride from ragtime.
Sure.
What's Joplin?
Scott.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong with Scott. Ooh, right. Lord. Yeah,
yes.
He's a poster boy of yes. Rag. Eve Cook, that's principal. Keita was saying, great topic. Thank you, by the way. Slavery is control. The power of that control is still evident today. The Willie Lynch letter said it best. I have a foolproof method for controlling your black slaves. I guarantee you, every one of you, that if installed correctly, it will control the slaves for at least 300 years. And he was prophetic.
Yes, he was.
Because it's still going on, the control. We're going to, let's see, I think letter F. That's a failing grade for Alvin, by the way, what he was coming up.
No, F meant fantastic.
Oh, it did? Okay. Well, in my school, it meant fair. What's my grade, teacher? Fair. This is Priscilla. Priscilla, all right? I've got 3 files that I'm playing that this could kind of explain who her life was. Priscilla, I'm calling this Priscilla and the Middle Passage, all right? I guess we're going to use her story as an example of what happened in the Middle Passage, the rice fields, and some other things that may have happened, okay? Here goes the Middle Passage.
In 1756, a British ship named the Hare set sail for Charleston carrying 80 African slaves. One of them was a 10-year-old girl. We don't know where she was from. We don't know her parents' names. But we do know the name that her master gave her, Priscilla.
Way in the water, way in the water, children, way in the water.
Priscilla was at the start of a journey that would change her life forever. The dreaded Middle Passage.
The entire experience is so horrific and so just brutalizing in ways that are just unimaginable for a contemporary audience. You have public floggings, you have decapitation, being immersed in your own bodily excrement. It is complete loss of control over your life in every way possible. Think about an 8, a 9, a 10-year-old. It is something that you're never going to forget, and it's going to be etched in your memory.
Women on the ship, even girls as young as Priscilla, faced an added danger. They were completely at the mercy of the male crew.
Women were considered to be available prey at any given moment for the entire ship crew throughout the passage. So some women would commit suicide, and some women did decide that I don't want to bring a child into this world. So they inserted some sort of piece of wood or nail or something to, cause violence upon their body, and you also find that some women would actually die from these attempts.
Priscilla spent 10 weeks on the ship. She saw 13 of her fellow Africans die along the way, their corpses thrown into the ocean. Death was so common on slave ships that sharks followed in their wake, feasting on the dead bodies. As the ship drew close to shore, the slaves were rubbed with a mixture of gunpowder and oil to make them look healthier, hiding the wounds from their beatings and chains. Then Priscilla stepped into a new world. Charleston, South Carolina. This was once the center of the slave trade in the 13 colonies. Over 40% of all the slaves who entered our country came through this city. In Priscilla's time, South Carolina had more black slaves than white citizens. In fact, it was called Negro country. Slave auctions were held on the streets of Charleston almost every day. Priscilla was bought at one of these auctions by a rice planter named Elias Ball.
South Carolina had more than anywhere.
Yes.
It was like the bed of slavery.
Yeah, that's what the Statue of Liberty should be.
That's what who?
The Statue of Liberty should be posted.
Yeah, man.
Considering the reason why it was gifted.
Yeah, that's good.
Either there or in New Orleans, because those are two ports where slavery,
yeah.
Basically came in.
Man, that's why I have a co-host, because I allow him to say the intelligent stuff, and I just write them down so I can share them on Facebook and say that I came up with it. Let's go to G. Priscilla.
Stuff that just be in my mind and I don't get a chance to say until I come here.
My mind is gone. Priscilla and the now rice fields, they look beautiful. Rice fields.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen them? Mm-hmm. And thank God for them, because I think I have a little Chinese in me because I love me some rice.
Well, Chinese ain't the only people like rice.
This is so true.
You get them people down in the southern hemisphere of the globe, they eat a lot of rice.
True. You're right.
With beans.
But as it pertains to who had to stomp on them rice. You know, if you ever seen anybody, you know, in the rice field.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know.
them patties, they stomping and pulling and...
Well, Priscilla
and
was
it's underwater.
Yeah, oh.
So your feet are always soaked.
Yeah, but when you hear this foul, watch what happens, though, to the slaves back in that time.
The second Elias, who bought Priscilla, bought 6 children, none of them older than 10. He liked buying children. In fact, he wrote a little memoir in which he said, "Do 2 things with your money, buy land and buy young slaves."
Why?
Better long-term investment. The white folks lived here. The black folks lived about a quarter of a mile away. The rice fields were about half a mile down that road. And that's where all the work of producing the money took place.
Rice. That's why Priscilla was here. Rice fields like these were making a fortune for slave owners. Don't let their beauty fool you. These places were death traps. The swamp ground was covered with snakes. The tropical air was filled with malarial mosquitoes. A third of South Carolina's slaves died within a year of their arrival, and nearly 2/3 of all children were dead before they turned 16. But Priscilla beat the odds. She and her family survived.
They didn't make it to 16, many of them, in the rice fields. Everything was tearing them up, from malaria. You know, this is before West Nile.
Yeah, before they start calling it that.
Calling it that, right. It's just amazing what they went through. And y'all said, so I heard people say today, they were like, man, if I was back in that time, there's no way I let no white man do yada to me. You know, I hear the stupidity among us.
They don't realize they're doing it to them on a whole nother level.
They're doing it when they go to work every day.
Every time you walk down the street with your pants sagging. Every time you act like you are in control of yourself because you listen to the type of music you're listening to, which you never would listen to because half the artists don't really want to release that. They're releasing that because they're trying to get a means to an end, hoping that they can get free artistic control and never get that. So they have to perpetuate the negativity for your control.
And for those of you who go on public aid and stay on it generation after
generation, that's slavery.
That's slavery, yes.
Because you never ascend to a place where they are.
Yep. Just public aid is supposed to be temporal to get you back on your feet. But y'all are using it to, that's your regular 9 to 5.
Yeah, because it's easy.
It's easy.
I remember, and I'm sidetracking just a bit since you brought up public aid. I remember there was a movie called Cinderella Man. It was a true story based on the boxer Jim Braddock. And Jim Braddock was, a blue-collar worker and a boxer who had his time and then fell on hard times. Yeah. But his pride would not allow him to stay down. He ended up getting public aid until he got back on his feet. And then he ended up getting back in the ring and ascending. He was a Cinderella from rag to riches. They called him Cinderella Man. Well, before he even became, before he returned back to the ring to beat Max Baer, which actually was Jethro Bodine's father.
Really?
Yeah. Before he beat him, he started taking the money back to the welfare offices. And they didn't know how to handle it. So once he started making money, he paid the government back.
Wow.
Because he had integrity and character. And he didn't want it looming over his head that he was a borrower.
Wow.
Or a taker.
You're going to make me go and see that again because it's been years since I saw it. I'm trying to see if it's on Netflix.
It is.
Find out. So that's the rice fields. And then H, Priscilla's family. Now, this is very interesting here because we can only trace our family back so far. But this Priscilla woman, way back then, family is living today, and they know who she is.
The Balls were fanatical about keeping records. They had books that listed the birthdays of all the slave children, books that listed the deaths of all the slave adults. And all of this stuff is collected in an archive of about 10,000 pages.
My God. Edward Ball spent 3 years poring over his family's records here in the South Carolina Historical Society.
Hampshire, Gambia, ditto, ditto, ditto. All of these men and women from Gambia. London,
Ball was trying to piece together the stories of his family's slaves. For most, he found no story at all. They survived only as names on a page.
Christmas.
People consumed by the brutality of slavery.
Samson. There was an ordinance where if you ran away and you were caught, you had to have 2 toes amputated. If you ran away again and you were caught, you had to have your ears amputated. And if you ran away a 3rd time, the punishment was castration.
Oh, man.
Law of the land.
They were not joking.
They were not kidding around, yeah.
As Ball scanned page after page, he began to see one name repeated.
Priscilla's 10 years old when she comes to Cumming Tea Plantation, and 10 years later, she's having her own children. Monimia, Priscilla's daughter, was born, and Monimia becomes the matriarch, and her grandchildren have children.
Ball was able to trace Priscilla's family tree down generations, stretching from the 1750s all the way to today. For an African American, this is extraordinarily rare.
Now, how are you related to Priscilla?
She is my great-great-great-great-great-grandmother.
Through your mother's
Through my
line?
father.
Through your
my
father.
father's. Mm-hmm.
So your father...
This is Tomalyn Polite.
Right.
She and her husband Antoine are carrying on a family line that began in Sierra Leone more than 250 years ago.
I was 19 years old when I first found out. It really hit me like, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
you know, this was my 5th grandmother.
My grandmother, yeah.
But she had to be tough.
She had to be. She had to be. I got some of that from her.
I was going to
Tomalyn is remarkably lucky. She actually knows the name of her original African ancestor. I don't know anyone else who could do this. For nearly all African Americans, including me, our original ancestors will remain forever anonymous and invisible. This was not an accident.
Removing people from genealogy is very important to making a slave. So if I only call you by your first name and never by a family name, I'm indicating to everybody, right, that you have no family, right? You're just Jimmy, you're just Sam, you're just Sarah, right? So they'll occupy a station that everybody will publicly recognize is at the lowest rung of society.
Masters worked methodically to erase the identities of their slaves so that they would be more productive. And these tactics were quite effective.
Very effective. I'm going to move through these files as quick as I can because all of them are very important. I'm just trying to take you through all of the season 1, or episode 1, that is. But the slave agriculture, I'm calling this the agriculture because it's about the eating.
Yes.
There is a misunderstanding of what the slaves ate. And I do know in some areas they did eat, the animals did eat better than some of them.
Yes.
But in many of the territories, you notice, if you ever see pictures of a mammy, notice she's a big fat woman. Okay. A lot of them were not starved as we think they are, but they were creative in what they made, though, because I believe we still today have some slave foods like chitlins. That's definitely from slaves. Okay. We have some other soul food products that.
But in other cultures, the same parts are considered delicacy. It's just called, menudo or haggis. Yeah, haggis. I think it is in Europe.
Sure. But if you listen to this file, you'll see that the slaves were very creative in how they could
be.
Yes, and even to this day, it's a delicatessen. Yeah.
I mean, you see what some people do with ramen noodles.
Oh man, it's amazing. Yeah. So let's go there. The slave agriculture. And this is I'm trying to correct some of the myths of what we ate.
Slaves built this country. They built roads and bridges, factories and farms, towns and cities. But they built something else as well, something all their own, a culture.
As much as slave masters tried to control the worlds of their slaves, they were vastly unsuccessful There was a persistence in history and culture and names that went across the Atlantic despite the best efforts of Europeans.
We tend to assume that the slave is a cipher, right? Because that's ideology. That's the ideology of slavery. That the slave is simply an extension of the master's will. That's the plan. That's the idea. But that's not really what you can ever do to a human being. Human beings always find a way to assert their own prerogatives. So black people create new kinds of cultural patterns that didn't obtain in Africa, that weren't those of the whites, but were something new in the Americas.
This garden signifies crops that enslaved African Americans would have grown, would have been.
One of the most enduring expressions of any culture is food. Even today, we can try to access the world of our ancestors by tasting it.
What do we have here, Michael?
Well, you have a late 18th, early 19th century feast without the okra, just for you.
Michael Twitty is a food historian.
We have kala congri, which are basically black-eyed pea fritters from New Orleans. And then a lot of people in this region had 3 salt herrings a week.
He's cooked me an 18th century meal to show how slaves from different parts of Africa crafted a distinct African-American cuisine.
So you get a taste. Hominy or mush, ash cakes, hoe cakes, etc. Would have been the staple of your diet.
Give me some hot and jump.
Oh, you gotta have that.
You're a good cook, man.
Thank you, sir. This came out of my garden yesterday afternoon.
Wow.
From Spartanburg, South Carolina. But all those recipes, there's straight out of the history books.
People are great.
When in the history of humankind has an enslaved people revolutionized the way the people who enslaved them ate, drank, believed the way Africans did in the Americas?
That's sorghum?
Yeah.
This is the first time I've ever
Well,
seen
you see, it looks just like corn.
Twitty has traced the roots of foods that connect Africa, the Caribbean, and the Americas in a vast Black Atlantic culture. A culture the slaves even propagated among their white masters.
It amazed me. One reference was one of the former governors of Virginia, his wife, said that no one bakes a ham better than a big fat Negro mammy.
Oh, really?
And you think about this. The ham as a food was not invented in Africa.
No.
But somehow we got our hands on the sugar cane.
And our ancestors blackified it.
We blackified it. We took everything and made it made it better and made it more soulful, if you will.
So let's put a little pineapple cherries on there. And put a little maple syrup.
And brown sugar. Now you know maple syrup. We don't do maple syrup.
Excuse me. Brown sugar. Brown sugar.
It's a creolization process. So while the okra soup and the black-eyed peas and the hop and john and the red rice and jambalaya and gumbo, blah, 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 is going to the master's house, those cooks are bringing European Western dishes into the slave quarter.
The flow is going both ways.
The flow is going both ways. And what we have to recognize is everybody puts their stamp on it.
Everybody put their stamp on it. The mixture, that's what I call it agriculture. We have a culture, and everything we do is about us. Even though the slave owner tried to take it from us, our identity, from where we come from. I look at the story of Moses, which is very interesting, because when he was a boy at 5 years old, he was taken from his family. All right. Well, he not at 5, but he was taken as a baby, put on the river, and we know about Pharaoh's daughter taking him. And then what she did was she gave him back to his mom to kind of wean him up. Okay, wean him. And then he returned to Pharaoh's house, and he was in Pharaoh's house for 40 years or so. Okay. All right. But then notice how he then began to defend the Hebrew people.
Yes.
Even to the point of killing one of Pharaoh's henchmen and burying him. Okay. And saying, because there was something in Moses that kept telling him he's not an Egyptian. He's a Hebrew. And I think there's something in us, no matter how much something is from birth, because you notice in the clip they kept saying that they purchased the young people, they purchased children. Sometimes
they were more valuable.
They were very valuable because then they can raise them,
they mold them,
okay. But then when they get of age, they begin to revolt and go against the tyranny of the oppression. because there's something in them saying that, just something's not right.
And then they were teenagers too.
Yeah.
Teenagers revolt against everything. So when
yes,
somebody's beating you and making you do stuff, and
Yeah.
you know they don't love you.
Yeah.
So it's easy to fight.
It's easy to fight against. Absolutely. Yeah. And they came together.
Look at the demographic that's most victimized right now with what's happening with police brutality. Mid-teens to between the tweens,
That's right. I noticed that.
Yeah, and that they're at that rebellious questioning stage.
That's a good way of
and
putting it.
the only way that they survive is that they have someone that they respect and that they know love them, and they could see that they've been through a journey of their own.
Yeah.
That they could hear.
Right. St. Augustine, Florida. Okay.
Okay.
All right. It's a place we've probably heard the name, but this place is amazing. I didn't know the history of this until I
never
started
heard
studying.
of it.
Yeah. It's up in the Jacksonville territory, I believe it is. But I'm calling it St. Augustine or Bust, and listen to this file, and you'll be amazed.
Okay.
Food was not the only thing flowing throughout the Atlantic world. So were ideas. Ideas about music, dance, religion, but especially ideas about freedom, even if the masters wished otherwise.
Black people knew they were people. Whether whites thought it or not, they knew they were people. And so if you hear words about liberty and freedom, things that they wanted, of course they would think it would apply to them.
St. Augustine, Florida. This is the oldest city in the United States. Built by the Spanish in the 1560s and held by Spain almost continuously until 1821. This beautiful place has special meaning for African Americans because as slavery's grip tightened in the British colonies, Spain declared that runaway slaves could come here and be free. Why? Politics. Colonial Spain was locked in a ferocious rivalry with colonial England. So they welcomed any fugitive slaves who would convert to Catholicism, swear loyalty to the Spanish crown, and serve in the colonial militia. Suddenly, slaves in the British colonies simply had to make it across the St. Mary's River into Spanish Florida, and they would be free.
They knew the geopolitics of the region, that the English and the Spaniards were enemies. Enemy of my enemy is my friend, sort of thing. And we often find that they get their information from the Indian groups who have gone back and forth.
So the Indians say, hey, you black people, you get on the boat, you get down to a place called St. Augustine, you'll be cool, you'll be free.
Well, they wouldn't have known that, but they'd have known where St. Augustine was, and they would have known the Spaniards and the English were at war, that the Spaniards didn't like the English being there, and they took their lives in their hands. They get in a boat and they make it.
Soon there were so many black people in St. Augustine that the Spanish built them their own town, called Fort Mose, just a few miles to the north. Nothing remains of Fort Mose. It is sunk entirely into the swamps of the Atlantic coast. But this was the first all-black settlement in what would become the United States, an outpost of freedom in a slave land.
I'm trying to imagine what it must have felt like to arrive here after traveling through swamps, across rivers, and through the wilderness, finally gaining your freedom at Fort Mose. Slavery breeds dreams of freedom in every human breast. African American culture is full of references to the day of Jubilee, to making it to the Promised Land. Well, for African slaves, Fort Mose was the Promised Land, and crossing St. Mary's River, well, that was like crossing the River Jordan.
So many slaves tried to run here that the British started executing them in public to staunch the flow. But even that couldn't stop them.
Yeah, St. Augustine, Florida. Man, that was the place to escape. And the Spaniard says, that's why we got black people who are Catholics.
Yeah.
Because of this. And it says, listen, you come over here and fight with us. Because, there's that fight against the Spanish and the Brits. Man, this is some history you guys haven't heard. And again, my show was created for you to be educated on stuff you should know. But we try to get into the deep crevices of history. It's 5:30 in the Chicagoland area, and I guess you can't do a show like this without going to Selma. You got to go to Selma. I want to hear some Common. He's not, he kind of Common with us. He's Chicago boy. John Legend. One day when the glory comes, there will be joy. Yeah, he's got that like something is stuck. It's got a nice sound though. He might be listening. John the Legend, Glory from the movie Selma. So on the Jones Show.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure. Oh, glory, glory, oh, glory.
Hands to the heavens, no man, no weapon formed against, yes, glory is destined. Everyday women and men become legends. Sins that go against our skin become blessings. The movement is a rhythm to us. Freedom is like religion to us. Justice is juxtaposition in us. Justice for all just ain't specific enough. One son died, his spirit is revisiting us. True and living in us. Resistance is us. That's why Rosa sat on the bus. That's why we walk through Ferguson with our hands up. When it go down, we woman and man up. They say stay down, and we stand up. Shots, we on the ground. The camera panned up. King pointed to the mountaintop, and we ran up.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, glory, glory, oh, glory, glory. Now the war is not over. Victory isn't won, but we'll fight on to the finish. And then when it's all done, we'll cry glory, oh glory,
oh. Selma is now for every man, woman, and child. Even Jesus got his crown in front of a crowd. They march with the torch, we gon' run with it now. Never look back, we done gone hundreds of miles. From dark roads, heroes, to become a hero. Facing the League of Justice, his power was the people. Enemy is lethal, a king became regal. Saw the face of Jim Crow under a bald ego. No one can win a war individually. It take the wisdom of the elders and young people's energy. Welcome to the story we call victory. The coming of the Lord, my eyes have seen the glory.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, glory, glory,
oh.
300 miles north of Fort Mose, just outside of Charleston, runs the Stono River. When word of the fort reached this place, it inspired one of the biggest slave revolts in the history of the British colonies. It all started right here, the site of what was once a general store called Hutchinson's.
Sunday morning, September 9th, 1739, Hutchinson's store had been looted.
Its guns and ammunition had been stolen. 2 shopkeepers lay dead, their severed heads lying on the steps of the store. Plantations on either side of the river were burning. An army was on the move, an African army. They were headed for Fort Mosaic. They set out before dawn, a group of roughly 20 men. Their tactics were simple. They surrounded plantations, then burned them to the ground. The ringleaders came from the Kingdom of Congo, a powerful African state. Some had military training, and they had a plan.
Slaves marched over to Pon Road, which was a road that, if you took it south, it would take you down into Georgia, down into Savannah, and ultimately all the way down to Florida. They were beating drums. Now, the beating of the drums is terribly important because that shows us that they were attempting to draw other Africans into their midst.
By afternoon, the rebel army had grown to nearly 100, and they kept moving south, along what today is this highway, which still leads from South Carolina to Florida. But they didn't make it. Just 20 miles outside of Charleston, an armed militia caught up with them in a clearing in these woods. The survivors faced a gruesome fate.
A number of the people who were captured, they'd be beheaded.
Beheaded?
They would be beheaded by the militiamen, and as was a usual practice during the time period, their severed heads were placed on top of posts along the highway.
So right along here,
yes,
we would have seen the heads of these rebels.
Yes, that's right. And that was meant to instill fear and to teach a lesson to all who observe, to try to discourage people from rebelling.
This must have been the planters' worst nightmare.
It was. Absolutely.
I mean, worse than their worst nightmare. They couldn't imagine that these Congo Africans knew anything about guns and ammunition.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Absolutely right. This was the worst insurrection to occur in 18th century British colonial North America.
In the wake of the rebellion, South Carolina imposed harsh new slave laws. They banned drumming and literacy and set drastic punishments on runaways. But no laws ever could force the slaves to accept their fates.
Yeah, man. Dred Scott, y'all know about that. The revolts going on and on and on. The people, they're tired of how they were treated. The women raped and their children used as alligator bait. All kind of things were going on at that time. Just inhumane. And y'all think animals are inhumane, being treated inhumanely today? Y'all see these commercials? Please.
Nothing compared to what they did to people.
Absolutely nothing. These are people. They were made in God's image, as he explained in Genesis 9. And that's why I believe in capital punishment, because God still do as well. He didn't change his mind on capital punishment, by the way. Go in scripture, you tell me where he changed his mind. But then there's a Haitian revolt. The Haitian revolt, that is a file. I'm not going to play that right now because I'm running out of time, but it was a slave revolt in the French colonies of Saint Dominique, or something like that, which culminated in the elimination of slavery there and the founding of the Republic of Haiti. The Haitian Revolution was the only slave revolt which led to the founding of a state. Ain't that something? Furthermore, it is generally considered the most successful slave rebellion ever to have occurred, and as a defining moment in the histories of both European and the Americans. The revolt began with the rebellion of black African slaves in April 1791. And you guys know the story. And that's why we have Haiti today. Of course, it's in disarray and almost disrepair because of the hurricane that came through there. But nevertheless, I'm trying to play this one more file here because I got about 3 others, but we'll save it maybe for tomorrow. We can continue this in another vein. But the story of George Washington and Harry. I'm calling this George and Harry. This is very interesting. Y'all don't know about George Washington, but you're going to hear about him now. Let's see what this sounds like.
This is Mount Vernon, George Washington's estate. For so many of us, an icon of American independence. But for more than 100 African Americans, this was a plantation, where from sunup to sundown, they toiled as slaves. The father of our country was also one of its largest slave owners. Slaves tended his fields and watched over his every need. One worked in these stables, a groomsman named Harry Washington. Harry heard the talk around Mount Vernon about liberty and independence, but he sensed it wasn't meant for slaves. So like many black people, he decided to take his chances with the British.
Once the war comes, there are enslaved men and women saying, hey, we'd love to help you out if you would help us out. We'd be happy to help you suppress this rebellion in Massachusetts if you will grant our freedom in return.
Harry joined a loyalist regiment called the Black Pioneers, and he wasn't the only one. Roughly 20,000 slaves ran away to the British lines, far more than joined the Patriot cause.
There were a lot of Harry Washingtons in the British Army. In fact, it's probably fair to say that especially in the southern colonies, the British Army effort could not have been as successful as it was for a time without the assistance of former slaves.
Unfortunately, most of these black loyalists were ravaged by the war.
Many of them died. Many of them contracted smallpox. They met terrible fates, many of them, but you can understand why they opted for it. That gives you a measure of what slavery was like, that people would take that kind of risk.
Harry Washington was one of the lucky few. In the waning days of the war, the British put him on a ship and evacuated him to Canada.
The British definitely wanted to use the blacks to help them in their struggle against the colonists, but they did not want to, had no intention of actually making them, equal to them and bringing them and making them part of British society. So drop them off there and let them make their way.
Harry didn't stay long in Canada. He and his fellow black loyalists were barred from voting and exploited by local whites. So when the British set up a colony for former slaves back in Sierra Leone, Harry was among the first to emigrate. He ended up near here, one of the very few slaves who ever made it back to Africa. But Harry didn't necessarily want to go back to Africa. You know what Harry wanted? He wanted what his old master George wanted. Freedom. The right to do as he pleased. Unfortunately, he did not find it here. The British government in Sierra Leone tried to limit the property rights of the black settlers. Harry fought back and was banished for insubordination. After that, he disappeared. Harry was a rebel to the end, and it's probably best that he turned his back on America because he wouldn't have liked what America became.
Amazing story.
Yes, there's a lot of stories of them using the soldiers. Well, we were used on both sides of the war.
Both sides. Almost like, you remember, you usually reference the Confederate flag as it being treason.
Mm-hmm.
We committed treason.
That's exactly my point.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why I say, how could they allow that when Britain saw us as treason, and they were going to wipe out any of those colonist leaders. That's the significance of John Hancock's signature being so big, because he knew the risk he was taking.
Sure.
And he wrote it as large as he could, because folklore says they want to know who's going to sign first. Who's going to be the first to sign it? Yeah. Why not the writer of it? How come he didn't sign first? Right. And Hancock says he jumped up and said, I'm bold enough to sign it, and he signed it real big, and everybody else's signature is small.
If you look at the document,
small,
you'll see it.
But his is big.
And that's how we coined the old phrase.
Put your old Hancock.
Put your Hancock on it. That's good history.
Yes. Yeah. And so you think about the Confederate States decided to repeat what the colonies did. Yeah. Because many of those slave owners were descendants of the people who caused the Revolutionary War. And they had the same ideology, the same teaching, the same mindset. George Washington had one of the largest plantations because slave labor was free, not just cheap, it was free. That's what made him so prosperous. I mean, when companies, big businesses need to increase their bottom line, they don't deduct the big salaries. Right. They go to the labor force.
They go to labor force.
And they'll lay you off and hire 2 for 1.
And that's why the banks kept their CEOs. A lot of them did. And there's another file I'm going to play tomorrow because I think I'm going to do black church versus white church tomorrow. It's Theology Thursday. And want to talk about it because there's a reason why Washington, D.C. is our capital. It has a lot to do with slaves, believe it or not. But does the Bible condone slavery? There is a tendency to look at slavery as something of the past. But it is estimated that there are today over 27 million people in the world who are subject to slavery, forced labor, sex trade, inheritable property, etc., as those who have been redeemed from the slavery of sin. Followers of Jesus Christ should be the foremost champions of ending human slavery in the world today. I say both in body and mentality. And that's what I'm saying. The question arises, though, why does the Bible not speak out strongly against slavery? Why does the Bible, in fact, seem to support the practice of human slavery? The Bible does not specifically condone the practice of slavery. It gives instructions on how slaves to deal with it. Should be treated. Deuteronomy 15:12, Ephesians 6:9, Colossians 4:1, but does not outlaw slavery altogether. Many see this as the Bible condoning all forms of slavery. What many fail to understand is that slavery in biblical times was very different from the slavery that was practiced in the past few centuries in many parts of the world. The slavery in the Bible was not based exclusively on race, is what I said earlier in the show. People were not enslaved because of their nationality or the color of their skin. In Bible time, slavery was based more on economics. It was a matter of social status. People sold themselves as slaves when they could not pay their debt or provide for their families. They sold themselves. In New Testament times, sometimes doctors, lawyers, and even politicians were slaves of someone else. Some people actually chose to be slaves as to have all their needs provided by their masters. I know some people who check themselves into jail because they can't afford to stay outside. They can't eat. They don't have shelter. So they committed crimes so they can be warm in the wintertime. I've heard the police say this. They say, "Oh, our jails are full in the winter because
it's cold outside.
It's cold." The slavery of the past.
Bunch of Otises, huh?
Yep, there you go. And, he had the key. He was going in. The slavery of the past few centuries was often based exclusively on skin color. In the United States, many black people were considered slaves because of their nationality. Many slave owners truly believe black people to be inferior human beings. The Bible condemns race-based slavery in that it teaches that all men are created by God and made in his image. Genesis 1:27. At the same time, the Old Testament did allow for economic-based slavery and regulated it. The key issue is that the slavery the Bible allowed for in no way resembles this racial slavery that plagued our world in the past few centuries. In addition, both the Old and New Testament condemn the practice of man stealing, which is what happened in America in the 19th century.
Yep.
Africans were rounded up by slave hunters, who sold them to slave traders, who brought them to the New World to work on plantations and farms.
Or even here, they went into free states.
Yes, sir. There you go. Absolutely. This practice is abhorrent to God. In fact, the penalty for such a crime in the Mosaic Law was death. It says anyone who kidnaps another and either sells him or still has him when he is caught must be put to death. Exodus 21:16. Similarly, in the New Testament, slave traders are listed among those who are ungodly and sinful and are in the same category as those who kill their fathers or mothers, murderers, adulterers, and perverts, and liars and perjurers. They're in the same category. That's 1 Timothy 1:8. Another crucial point is that the purpose of the Bible is to point the way of salvation, not to reform society. The Bible often approaches issues from the inside out. If a person experienced the love and the mercy and grace of God by receiving his salvation, God will reform his soul, changing the way he thinks and acts. A person who has experienced God's gift of salvation and freedom from the slavery of sin, as God reforms his soul, will realize that enslaving another human being is wrong. He will see, with Paul, that a slave can be a brother in the Lord. Philemon 1:16. A person who has truly experienced God's grace will in turn be gracious towards others. That would be the Bible's prescription for ending slavery. And many of my atheist friends always go back to try to take the Bible and use it against me by saying the Bible promotes slavery. So how could you be an African American? Believe in this Bible and a white God, basically. They're saying that the white slave masters, and in part is correct. They did use the Bible to try to keep us enslaved.
Yeah.
But
because they knew we understood spirituality and understood God.
That's right. That's right.
And they knew that if we tell them what God says, that they would obey God.
Yes.
Even though the Spirit of God. And then this is where I often talk to people, because I don't get involved. That's not my gifting to argue the faith. I'm not an apologist. I just know that.
Sure.
I know you are. But I'll tell them, I said, it's one thing to know about this book, but it's another thing to know the writer.
Oh, man. The
and
author.
There are some people who know the writers.
Yes.
Who couldn't read, but they knew
Right.
God.
They did.
Because they understood and recognized his spirit, because it's a spiritual book before it is a logical book.
Yeah, man, you're preaching that. This not even Theology Thursday, and you already going there. You should.
It's Thursday somewhere.
It's somewhere in the world. It is Thursday.
In Japan, it's Thursday.
Right. And so tomorrow we're going to talk about the black church and the white church. It just came to me today. I didn't have no show for tomorrow, but I do now. We're talking about why is it that the white church is not getting involved in racial situations. Many of them are the cause of it, and they're part of it, but they're not getting involved in it.
Or maybe they're doing it in a different way that we know not of. Just like until recently, a lot of people did not know how many white people were involved in the March on Selma.
Sure.
And how many people,
they're hiding, though.
Well, because as many of them that are in mega ministry as they are blacks, there's some that should or could speak out.
Yeah, they're afraid.
Because of the backlash they all face too. Because some were killed too as a result.
Yeah, and
that's funny. The people who say they believe the Bible, but then kill one of God's messengers.
Many of them who say they believe in the Bible won't die for it, though. They won't die for it.
Oh, I know.
They're afraid to die for that. They go through some of the third world countries where if you were caught with the Bible, you will die. And we don't realize how free we are over here. So there's a couple of articles that I was going to read today, but I'm going to wait till tomorrow's subject. One is called How Does Slavery Benefit the White People Today? It's, believe it or not, there's still the benefit. And another one is the legacy of slavery still fuels anti-black attitudes in the Deep South. All right? That one here was probably going to get me. I have an underground bunker that I'm building in my backyard so I can hide out. It's got a toilet, refrigerator. That's about it, because it doesn't need anything else. I'm a bachelor. That's all I need.
You don't need no microwave?
Well,
you gotta have electricity. You're a computer buff.
The heat from the sun. Sometimes I can heat that stuff up, because
Okay, then you got solar power.
I got solar power.
Then you can plug up a microwave.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah,
because you got to run a refrigerator with electricity.
That's true. That is true. Yeah, but I eat cold chicken.
That's the best.
It is, man.
Cold pizza.
Yes, Lord. Yeah, hallelujah.
I'm married, but I still have bachelor-like tendencies.
Bachelor tendencies. We're going to let Martin Luther King, you don't know Martin Luther King, we're going to let him end us out here. He's going to be my outro. Famous speech, 1963, I think it was. The March on Washington. Yeah, I have a dream. I dreamed just last night. that I was going to do this show today. I have a dream that I was going to finish early today. And I have another dream that I'm going to leave here and go to church. And tonight, I'm going to dream that I'm going to go to sleep so that I can dream again for tomorrow. Keep dreaming. Andre Crouch says that. Dreaming about you. Hoping that someday soon through the clouds you come bursting through. I really want to see you. I should do it in the key that I'm hearing here, right? I really want to see you. Yeah. I really want to be with you. Until then, I'll keep dreaming about you. Oh, oh, oh. So on the Joe Show.
I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children be able to sing with new meaning, "My country, tears of thee." Sweet land of liberty of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring. And when this happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, "Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last."
You've been listening to the Sir Walter Jones Radio Show, where he provides you with a biblical perspective for your everyday life. Stay connected to Sir Walter Jones by visiting him online at www.sirwalterjones.com or on Facebook at www.facebook.com/AskTheElder. Stay tuned until next time with the Sir Walter Jones Show with Sir Walter Jones.